Here we are at the Museum of Beaux Art. We're here for the Lyonel Feininger show. It's from Manhattan to Bauhaus. So Lyonel Feininger was an artist from 1871 to 1956. So that's a huge body of art history. As we're going through, I'll talk about the artist and styles that were similar and that can be accentuated or seen in his work. If you see, the show opens up with these giant pavilions, very architectural shape, and that's because some of his later drawings and paintings were very architectural. This is Mr. Feininger's grandson, Thomas, being interviewed. So he's one of the heirs of the estate, who's come down to celebrate his grandfather's career retrospective. So the genius career of Lyonel Feininger, illustrator. So he was an illustrator who then also went on to doing fine art. He was actually also a musician. If we look at these first drawings when we enter, you can actually see a very illustrative content to them. If you look at the lines and the way they're drawn, there's a very loose, expressionistic feeling to them, much like what might go on in a political cartoon. I'll take you over there to see some of his nice pencil renderings. Here are examples of some of the first cartoons that were printed. This is 1906 by the Tribune Chicago. This is in English. He was born in America. When he was 16, he was sent to Europe to study music, which he enjoyed creating throughout his career, which you'll see as we walk through the entire exhibition. Look at that nice elongated character, so beautiful. So while he was in Europe, he got into drawing. He was accepted into a school house, and he excelled as being one of the major recognized students or stars. Mr. Thomas Feininger. My name is Richard. I do a video blog about art. I was wondering, I'm just taking my audience through a visual talk of your grandfather's work and your father's work, which is at the end of the exhibition. Is there anything you'd like to say that might help anybody?
Good luck. It's a beautiful exposition.
Thank you very much. Do you like the way the musée has represented the work?
C'est magnifique.
C'est magnifique. Est-ce que vous habitez dans Montréal? Did you live in Montreal?
No. Nous sommes des visiteurs ici.
Okay. You came from where?
Québec.
From Quebec?
Oui.
Okay.
Et vous êtes pour quel...
Ça s'appelle Rosetta Inc. et aussi Art and Culture. Okay. Merci. Excuse me. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Feininger. So this is an example of some very, very super fine renderings. If you look at the tones and the way the objects move through space and the way light reflects off of. And these are 1893. So he arrived in Paris in 1892. What's amazing about this artist is the fact his body of work was created throughout, I guess, the history of modernism. And you can see references of it all. Toulouse-Lautrec, the godfather of poster art. Look at this nice ink drawing. You can see influences from everything from expressionism, Fauvism. Somebody mentioned the Nimbus. You can also get into some. If you look at that, that has a very. It's funny when we look back at art history, how this is our modern images are haunted by it. It makes me think of Mark Ryden, or that style of art. If you look at the woman in behind, another example of his illustration. These are all very technical drawings. It's Mr. Feininger himself. This is him drawing for his amusement, I would say. Because even when he's not working, he might be playing around. He might be thinking of stuff for his children to write. Pen, brush, Indian ink on paper. This is simply a phenomenal collection. Look at that chubby guy in there. It starts to get a little more loose, a little more artistic. You can see it's signed and dated on the front. This is an architectural drawing, which then comes out further when he starts to play with Baroque imagery. So now we get to the art that I'm more familiar with, and we start, if we look at the colors and the style, it starts to look like the Fauves, who Henry Matisse was noted as being one of the starters of, might even say godfather of. And the reason I say that is because of the unclear lines, the boxy shapes, and his use of colors. They're a little wild, which is what Fauve meant. These are just city scenes of life in Paris, you'd assume. Look at how textural, and look at how perspective is created. It's the almost childlike innocence. Once again, form and perspective are created. In this particular painting, you can see how it's created through overlapping and not through the division of planes. If you look at the bodies, there's only slight tone differences to say where a shoulder might be, or where the body might rest, and where the fabric rests. This is another example, in my opinion, of his work, which very much resembles the Fauves. And that was Matisse in early 1900s. This painting is dated 1910. Over here, you can see, or you can see it's reminiscent of a Kandinsky or a Chagall. And I say that due to line usage, the fact it's painted in watercolor with ink, color usage, and also, once again, the division of the planes. For me, this has more of an expressionistic feeling, almost like a Van Gogh. 1918. I'm not sure of my dates. Yes, Van Gogh would have painted by then. Look at these colors, the yellows. Look at the way, once again, form is divided through subtle tone. Here's some great maquettes. I wish I could zoom in there for you. I don't have a zoom on my BlackBerry. These maquettes are reminiscent The guy who did Nightmare Before Christmas. Tim Burton. For some reason I couldn't remember. It's funny if you look at the ruggedness of these buildings and these little figures, but then if you look at the drawings right beside them, very sharp, accentuated lines. These are actually, are these lithos? No, it says it's ink and charcoal on paper. Perspective is devised by the use of lines as well as mass. So that gives the object movement in space. It's a very illustrative feel, once again, very expressionistic. The yellows make me think of Van Gogh. Almost like the bathers, you can see that this is just modern life in society. Modern life in Paris, bicycle racers. Once again, now the tones are broken up even more by color. This was the only Feininger work that I recognized, and please excuse my ignorance. Cat-like eyes. Pastel-y colors, subtle colors, subtle pastel colors. And here we start to get into the architectural shapes that we were talking about before. And look at the way they move through the movement of the image, changing planes, changing surfaces. This is similar to the style of work Chagall might have done. It's almost a certain religious feeling to it. Something greater than human themselves. I don't know if it's that color yellow, but there's that Van Gogh. Once again, the fobs. One of the other great things I think about this particular exhibition is the way they use the background that the museum color has chosen to paint the walls, accentuates the paintings. So we walk into a gray room, dark gray room, and then we see these beautiful, subtle gray, ominous, city-like structures. Foreboding. Even when they're light. Let's go back and look at these tonal drawings. You can just barely see that. This is a beautiful tonal drawing. Just with the subtle use of pencil mark and changing tones creates a forest. Some childlike renderings. It's almost have a Hallmark card-esque feeling. At one point, one of the curators was talking about overlapping geometric shapes. This would be one of the images she would be talking about. And the way the paint is laid, you sometimes can't tell. Sometimes cannot tell if it's only paint or whether there's actual canvas, another layer of something. This year, you would have seen the Baroque period. And here he starts to create depth through the use of shape and light. So the reason we see into the painting is because of the angles of the octagonal, that's not an octagonal, of the diamond-like shapes and how they're set in perspective of the image. He also uses colors to highlight certain areas, so it looks like they're flowing back, they're coming forward, they're darkened to come forward. To be a figurative version of the last style. He was a contemporary. What's amazing is he was a contemporary of all the greats. Chagall, Kandinsky, Matisse, the Bauhaus movement, one of the founders, one of the star students. These are photos from his life. And that's the beautiful thing about art, is it captures history. These are Baroque illustrations. Images broken down into forms. This is a woodcut, or planes broken down into forms and geometric shapes. It's a woodcut. It's a piece of paper that has stood the test of time. Looking for a date. Since 1920. That's a 100-year-old piece of paper. Another one. These works have stood their test in time. So if we look at the different styles that he worked in, we see nuances of all the contemporaries. Miro, Clay, subtle, tone changes to create perspective. And now once again, let's look at how the entire show is presented overall in its space. The colors in here seem much more somber. The background choice of background paint is also darker and more somber. As I stated before, this is the time of the degenerate artist, and this would have been, let's say before or as he was fleeing Nazi Germany, and all work that did not fit into what the not the Tsar, what the Kaiser, maybe I've got that wrong, deemed as proper Aryan art was deemed as degenerate. This man's work, partially because of his associations, was deemed as degenerate. It would also have been deemed as degenerate because it was expressionistic and it wasn't classical. There's proof that all great artists work in many mediums. You're hearing music written and recorded by Feininger. I don't know whether it was recorded, but written by Feininger. When he was 16, as I stated, he was sent to Europe to study music. I think as we walk through the entire collection, you can see that there is not a style of modern art that Lyonel Feininger's work does not touch on. And his body of work stands in the history of time. And this last little bit are photos from Andreas Feininger. His work is very similar to that of his father's. In the fact, you can see a mix of many other photographer styles work. Man Ray, Ansel Adams. I wish John Paul was here. He was giving me a nice tour before I started recording. You can see some of it's industrial, some of it's environmental. It's all organic shapes. Things moving through space.